Hello, everybody. You are listening to the Soberful podcast. I'm Veronica.
And I'm Chip.
So the title of today's podcast, this has come from a sort of ongoing conversation that Chip and I have had, like when we're not recording. And then we were like, let's do a whole episode on this. The title of the episode is Not Everything is a Trauma. And I'm just going to say we are going to probably in this episode talk about what is actually a trauma. So just so you're aware, this is an adult conversation. Just be aware of who's listening, all that kind of stuff. But we've kind of, this is where I'll start. I felt for some time the words of therapy and how we label stuff or give stuff meaning, describe experiences in clients' lives has escaped the therapy room and is just being slapped around on anyone, everywhere, for anything. Yeah. And that everybody's traumatized. It's just all trauma. And I'm beginning to get a bit kind of like, you know what? No. And I think you feel the same way, right?
I feel very, very much the same way. I mean, I have to be careful because as a sufferer of what I consider to be quite extensive childhood sexual trauma, which has had a really devastating effect on me. I, for instance, do get, I've known somebody ring up and say, my exam results didn't go the way I wanted. I can't come in today because I've got trauma about it.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry, but that's a completely inappropriate use of language. And for somebody who, it's very difficult. I find, personally, this is a very, very personal thing. I find that people who are banding about the word trauma, I kind of want to step in and say, okay, you want to hear what trauma is like? Okay, I mean, and mine is only, in a way, only childhood sexual abuse trauma. It was extensive, but it was, traumatic. But then there's a whole range of, if you're in a car accident and the person next to you, is burnt in front of you, that's trauma, Being late for your bus, having an argument with your partner, that's not trauma. And I think if we start to bandy about words without really understanding what they mean, we first of all diminish the word trauma, and we also then we are able to sort of kind of hide behind what we consider to be trauma, which isn't trauma at all. It's just you're having a bad day. Well, or whatever, or something unfortunate has happened to you. But it's not a trauma. And I think it's really important that we get it right, because there are other words that we're going to talk about today that I think, as you say, they've slipped out of the therapy room. I don't know how it's kind of come about, but I do think that there are a lot of phrases that have crept into modern speech that do not fit the criteria at all. And I think there are a lot of young people, and bless their souls, I know that I wouldn't like to be young right now. I wouldn't like to be 18 right now with sort of job prospects and what's ahead of me and my future and what, I do feel that is, a really unfortunate and difficult position to be in, but it's not traumatic. It's not going to incapacitate you in the way that trauma really can do. So I have a problem with trauma, and I have a problem with a couple of other words as well. But
I feel the same. I feel that something sort of happened in the last 20 years, and it's like we come from a place of deeply caring about how people feel and wanting people to be healed, right? Like so many times when we were in rehab, like we would get someone in who just had a bloody bad run of things, really. Nothing had gone right in their life, and you see a little green shoot of possibility for them, and you're just rooting for them to just sort of get on a better path. And sometimes we have to rein in our empathy, right? I don't know if you felt that. Like sometimes you have to rein in your empathy and just not try, not like, and that's part of training, is that you can't fix people, you can't, but we do have an overabundance of empathy, I think. And what I feel has happened with this kind of escaping of the language everywhere is it's actually prevents resilience.
Yes.
It prevents growth, and it prevents healing.
Yes.
And I'm for all those things. I'm
Yes.
for growth, healing, and resilience.
Yeah.
There's also something else interesting that I feel is happening as well. And I feel it's extremely implicit in the Western world. And there's some, alongside everything that, I think that there is a belief that's being formed that you shouldn't struggle. That
Right.
there's something wrong if you struggle.
Yeah.
And that we should prevent struggle wherever possible. We should prevent it. And that is extremely dangerous and very, very wrong. Now, I just, what I want to say, like what you went through, Chip, no child should ever go through. And I would love to prevent that on all children on the whole planet from this day forward. I that's what, no child should be treated in that way. And you survived it. Not all of them do. And you flourished and you overcame it and you built a life. But and it's a struggle that you shouldn't have had to have gone through.
No.
But do you understand what I'm saying? There is
I do. And I mean, I think we've opened a large, because as you were talking just then, I think there's something about the way that the parenting pendulum has swung so far. I mean, I wouldn't want the way I was parented to be the model of parenting.
No.
And, that kind of post-war, kind of quite stern, just suck it up and just do what you're told and shut up. But the pendulum has swung so far the other way. And what you were talking about just then can be, at a young age, people, a little child learning to walk, if they fall over and you can see that they've not hurt themselves, just let them pick themselves up and start, make a joke of it. Oh, trips up there a little bit, But if you go rushing in, rescuing, are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay? You sure you're okay? You're okay. You don't allow that child to build up resilience, to build up the ability to cope with a little setback. And I know it's only, tripping up on the pavement isn't the biggest thing in the world, but I'm just using it as an example of very small things sort of being overprotected, and parents and I know that today I'm going to be talking a lot, I think, about the way that parents parent nowadays.
Yeah,
and
I have a lot to say about this.
Yeah, and I think that, let your child fall over. I mean, obviously you can tell at times if they've hurt themselves, but there are lots of times I've seen children, just fall over and, you just sort of laugh it off and go, oh, clumsy daisy. And they'll get up and they'll learn that it's okay to fall over. And then you can extrapolate that into a bigger kind of how to deal with problems kind of thing. But I think that parents step in far too quickly, supermarket.
I've got a good example, like real life example, 100%.
Great.
So I go on Mumsnet is a huge big platform in England for mothers, and they have a message board, and one of their threads is, am I being unreasonable? And where someone says, this is the scenario, I feel really angry or upset about that, but am I being unreasonable? And then people come in and go yeah or no. So there's constant ones like this. And one mum posted, and her child was, I think, in kindergarten, reception, whatever that is in England. And you can get she earned a special sticker for some achievement that she'd worked really hard for. And she was really proud of her sticker, so proud of her sticker. And then she lost it in the playground. And the mum contacted the school and said, oh, she was so devastated. She worked so hard. She really wanted that sticker. Can I get a replacement? And the school went, no, sorry. And the mum was just really upset and angry. And I'm like, right there. Perfect opportunity to help your child learn how to deal with disappointment.
Yeah.
There you go. This is not like, and the school did the right thing. Like that parenting. Stop it. You're setting your child up for psychological problems as an adult.
Absolutely.
Because It's sad and disappointing she lost her special sticker. I get that. Those feelings are very valid, and those are big feelings for a 6-year-old. Very big feelings. We don't want to minimize those feelings. We'll go get over it. We want to acknowledge those feelings, and we want to help them build the muscle of resilience that they can survive those feelings, and that they can be sad that they lost their sticker, and then they can then move on with their life.
Yes.
That is one of the best skills you can teach your child. Like,
absolutely,
do it now. And I see that all the time, the time. And we are, and then we're labeling it all a trauma.
Yes. And, my example of kind of rather different, slightly different to yours, is the way that we are empowering children with decision making at a completely inappropriate age. A child of 5 needs to know that they are being looked after, they are being kept safe, and the people looking after them are in control of the matter.
Yes.
And if at 5 to a 5-year-old you're saying, "What time do you want to go to bed, darling?" Which happens, it's not a joke. They are being, do you feel like going to bed now? That means that the child doesn't feel that you can't put that power and that control in the hands of a 5-year-old.
No.
And also, I'm not a one of, what's for dinner, Mum? Well, the answer should be supper or whatever it is. Not, well, I'd like, I don't like, I think there's too much. I mean, as I said, you've got to be careful that you don't kind of get into the old, well, just suck it up and get on with it. But, giving so much choice when, in order for a child to feel safe, they need to feel that, they don't have to make those choices. Those choices are made by the caregivers. Those opportunities are decided by the caregivers, and that makes them feel very safe. I think it's incredibly destabilizing for a young child to be given masses of choice over food, masses of choice over bedtime, masses of choice how they spend their time, complete freedom to do what they like whenever they like. And I don't think it's developmentally good for children to be in control of their life. I would probably say under 10, really, something like that. I don't know. I haven't got a clear idea, but certainly I see a lot of...
Yeah, it's about childhood development. And also, the really important thing to understand about childhood development is children have a very, very vivid fantasy life. Like they live a fantasy life in their minds, and that imagination part, like, we need to create safe boundaries. And I think it's a balancing act, isn't it? I completely agree with you. And like, I'm thinking with my 2, like, I've got one that's my husband and I were just saying this the other day. I've got one son who's 13, and for a little while now we can leave them on their own. Like, we finally can go and walk the dog. We don't always have to have a babysitter. Like, we're balancing. Like, I wouldn't go to a town an hour away and leave the 2 of them on their own in the evening, but we will go out for a couple of hours and just grab some food 5 minutes down the road. We're sort of there. And it's about, like, they have, like, instructions. There's no other kids in the house when we're not there, and blah blah blah, and they have to bust their table and blah blah blah, and so they're getting freedom. They're getting some freedom to operate within some really, protective boundaries. And I know we're now in the period of just balancing that, moving that a bit more, moving it a bit more, moving it a bit more. And which is what needs to happen now, is that they need to have independence and responsibility for their actions and consequences, which I'm trying to do. And it's natural as a parent to want to rescue your child from suffering or struggle or that. And sometimes that is the right thing to do. Somebody should have rescued you, Chip. Somebody should have rescued you. That would have been the right thing to do.
Yes.
And in many other situations, we should have been rescued. Like, I should have had someone go, get her out of there, right? So the job of the parent is discerning when and which thing they have to rescue their child from.
Yes. And going back to, the overuse of the word trauma, I think is really, really, if you're labeling every setback for the child as a trauma, then you're kind of setting that you're not allowing that child, as you said earlier on, to build up resilience, to learn that sometimes life doesn't go your way, sometimes you don't get what you want. It's not a trauma if you don't get the sweets you wanted from the supermarket, and or maybe a child saw a woman fall over or a man fall over in the street. You don't go home and say, well, look, she's a bit upset. I think she's a bit traumatized. She saw somebody fall over in the street today, or he saw somebody falling over. That's not a trauma, And I think if we diminish, and I think because I feel that I have a genuine right to the word trauma, and I get a bit kind of a bit sort of I know I have to be very careful that I don't get sort of like it's a kind of league, a league table of trauma. But I do get very protective of the word trauma because as somebody who's
we should be protective of the word trauma.
Yeah,
we should be.
Yeah, because as somebody who's suffered trauma, I don't want it diminished.
No.
What happened to me was going on for, I don't know, 5-6 years. I don't want, because you've missed the bus or because you're struggling a little bit with your exam at university, for that to be classed in the same category as me. It's not, I'm sorry, but that's not the same thing. You're having a bit of a difficult time. But I think what happens is, as you say, as it leaks out of there's the trouble is there's access to so much stuff everywhere that we all can, if you look hard enough down any rabbit hole on the internet, you will find something that kind of makes you feel, oh yeah, I've got trauma. Well, I think you have to be very careful about that kind of thing, because when you come across people in your life, as you will do, who have suffered trauma, they're going to really react, as I do, when I hear somebody bandying that word about over something that's not traumatic at all. And I think, as I said, I feel protective about it because trauma does happen. There are definitely traumatic things that happen to people. But especially to young people, I think a young child, having to constantly be in the middle of two fighting parents has a right to say that my childhood was traumatic because they were. But that would be, but one argument, that's not a trauma.
Yeah.
Constantly arguing, yes.
I want to define trauma so everyone knows what we're talking about. So the concept that I use is big T trauma and small t trauma. And big T trauma is a threat to life or perceived threat to life. Sexual abuse is perceived threat to life. It's such a violation of life that even though the perpetrator was not going to kill you, it's a so threat to life or perceived is big T trauma. Small t trauma are things like getting bullied, emotional abuse, non-life threatening injuries, divorce, a breakup, again, done in a particular way. So those things can be small t traumas.
Yes.
And I also believe passionately, as a therapist or a former therapist, that trauma is overcomable. And the goal is to not walk around just with the label of I've got trauma. Like I just, like, all the time I've known you, Chip, it's like it's really interesting, and I feel it's something of our generation, and there is something here about identity. Is like I've known several people like you that, like, bits and bobs of their backstory come out, and you're like, oh bloody hell, like, oh cool, didn't know that. So, like, over the years, like, bits of your story, and then I probably heard your story in a meeting, but it was always like it was part of your tapestry, but you never weaponized it, and you never wore it on a label on your head. Do you know, like, it was just like, I experienced you as a funny, fully functioning, responsible, appropriate adult, right? That was like my main, and it was like, oh God, like that cool. Now that's really, I filled in some blanks at the back there, but that isn't, I didn't experience you as a broken, like barely got through I didn't experience you like that. So there's something about like life is going to serve us some struggles. And unfortunately it serves some people some really bloody awful ones. And you can choose to do the work to get through that struggle and overcome it or not, is kind of where I'm at.
Exactly, yeah. And I thank you for that. I really do appreciate that comment, because I do get, I don't know, I have a problem with people who are grown up. The trauma that they suffered was many years ago. I've had to do work on it. I mean, I remember I didn't start talking about it till I was 37, and then I started talking about it inappropriately. And it wasn't until a few years later that I kind of did the work necessary to put it in its.
It's all part of the process.
To put it in its place, to see how it's affected me as an adult, but learn from it. And like every single thing that we do, look. But I don't want to be going, well, I'm a bit low today because my trauma's come back, and to be, just to be constantly using it as an excuse not to move forward. And you and I know people who went through rehab who they couldn't move forward. They just used this, they wrapped themselves in this sort of cloak called trauma, and that meant that they couldn't move forward. They were never going to be able to be happy. They were never going to be able to be, they weren't going to be able to make progress. And they just used it as almost as an introduction. And I'm not a fan of that. I think it's, if you've had traumatic experiences, you need to do the work and learn from it, and make sure that heal. And I can.
One of the words I always use with my clients, because I've been the recipient of many, many, many clients where I have been the first and probably the only person they have ever told about something that deeply traumatic that happened to them. And the first part, I want to just really highlight this, because I don't want anyone to listen to this and think, oh my God, they're just like, just get on with it. And we're not saying that. Is the first thing is what I would do when a client said that, or, in any situation, is really validate them. Really, like, the first part of that process is validation. That happened to you. That was not okay. That was extremely hard. It was extremely painful. Like validate, like that experience needs validation. What we're talking about here is process.
Yes.
Is that engaging in the process and moving through the process, so you can get to a place where whatever happened is part of your tapestry, but it doesn't own you anymore. And there may be, I've worked with a colleague who, is a few years sober, and had just started some work on something, and was had a few months of feeling quite raw, was really sober, really good professional, but had finally started talking about something that they hadn't talked about for a long time, or never talked about. And so they had a few months of being quite like raw. You could tell, like they were just very like this. And we were just sort of very loving with them, and very like, it's all right, mate. And he kept doing his work and all that kind of stuff. And then sort of the next year, you notice he was in a different place. That was different now. And it wasn't, that's what I'm talking about with process, right? I just I want people to understand that. We are not saying, oh, just get over it. Don't be so ridiculous. We're not saying that.
No. Okay, so for me, this tin here has a very strong association with my childhood trauma. And
what is it? I remember that from
Lion's golden syrup. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like a sweet syrup.
I know that picture very well, because I used to have to go and fetch it. So that is huge progress for me to be able to hold that can, because for years, if ever I saw it in the supermarket, I'd have to steer myself away from it. So this stuff, I've done a lot of work on it, but it can still get triggered. And strangely enough, I was out with relatives the other day, and the topic of people who abuse children came up. And I said, "Oh yeah, that happened to me, and it was done by my piano teacher." And the person said, "Well, how did you know that they were an abuser?" And I said, "Because they used to abuse me every time I had a piano lesson." And they, the sort of way I said it, they thought that was. And they went, "Oh, that's real class." They thought it was sort of funny, and I went along with the, I kind of went along with his. I wasn't going to cause a scene. It wasn't that kind of situation. But inside, I was going, "Take it easy, sir. Take it easy. You're just about to
Yeah.
cross a line, and
Yeah.
I've done a
Minimize
lot of.
something that's
Yeah,
not.
don't. If I want, there's a kind of ownership of it. If I want to be light about it, if I want to be open about it, I'll decide that. It's not for you to kind of do it. It's not. I haven't given you permission to make light of it. I'll decide if I want to do that. But I suppose what I'm trying to say is that, for me, that's the sort of thing that, that lives with you. And, you know, having trouble with your exam, those things that we're talking about, they don't live with you. You get over that. You learn, hopefully, you learn resilience. But I'm glad we're talking about sort of this, because to me, this subject about the overuse of the word trauma goes along with what I consider to be this year's most overused word.
What's that?
The word of the year is narcissist.
Right.
And you can't have a conversation anywhere. Instagram, TikTok is full how to deal with narcissists. You'd think the world was absolutely littered with it. And unfortunately, again, like we were talking about, it's diminished the actual meaning of the word narcissist. I've been looking at this today because, okay, these are the criteria you have to meet in order to be classified as a narcissist. They have an exaggerated, unfounded sense of their own importance and talents, grandiosity. They are preoccupied with fantasies of unlimited achievements, influence, power, intelligence, beauty, or perfect love. They believe they are special and unique and should associate only with people of the highest caliber. They need to be unconditionally admired. They feel entitled. They exploit others to achieve their own goals. They lack empathy. They envy others and believe that others envy them. They are arrogant and haughty. Now, in order to be classified as a narcissist, you have to match 5 of those criteria within the last, and they have to have started developing in early adulthood. Now, obviously, there are times when I feel entitled. There are times when I probably I might lack empathy about a situation, or I have an exaggerated sense of my own importance, or I feel that, there are times when I will exhibit some of those traits. But I think it's very important that we don't, because there are narcissists out there who are doing a lot of damage. But we need to make sure that we don't diminish the term so much that it stops having the meaning that it should do, because narcissists in their full flow are extremely dangerous people and difficult people to have around. But I think because it's just sort of slipped out into the public through social media, through things like that, I think it's become a diminished term, and people who are not narcissists are being labelled as narcissists.
When they're just perhaps being a bit like selfish or self-involved or manipulative, which is actually just quite a general human trait that we all have. We're all capable of being selfish and self-involved and manipulative. We've all done that.
Exactly. And if in the middle you go, "Oh, you're such a narcissist," well, yeah, you've got it. No, I kind of want to go, "No, you've got it wrong. I haven't." And because I've seen people who have been married to somebody who would match those criteria and who involves in gaslighting and all that. Gaslighting, another word that's become diminished in importance. Gaslighting is a very, very unpleasant thing to have to experience on a regular basis. And it's insidious, detrimental to relationships at a very deep level. And, if, I say to you, oh, you said we were going to go to the cinema yesterday, and you go, oh, stop trying to gaslight me. Again, you diminish the name of the term.
Yeah.
I've got it wrong, or I've got muddled, or I think I'm right and I think you're wrong. I'm not gaslighting you. Gaslighting is a deliberate campaign by somebody of a narcissistic trait to undermine and completely destroy the other person. Just having a disagreement.
A small t trauma. If you've experienced that with a duration over time, it's like trying to live on quicksand. You just never, and you're constantly doubting, and it can be really frightening.
Very frightening indeed, and therefore, I get, and I'm glad we're doing this book, because I think you've got to be very careful how you use this language, because somebody who is being gaslit is going to start, if they're in a conversation like that, they're going to start questioning, and they're not perhaps not going to feel that they're able to kind of talk openly about what they're doing, because I thought what was happening to me was gaslighting. I didn't realize that having a different opinion about what film we were going to see was gaslighting, and not deal with it. So I think people need to be very careful about the way they use language. I mean, I think we need to be very careful about the way that we empower children at a very young age. I obviously have a very strong opinion about the way that social media has influenced, and the influence of the iPhone or smartphone or whatever it is has had on young children and their development. I've got a whole episode on that, and how, parents, a number of times I've had parents say, oh, well, my children are on the phone all the time. I'm going, yeah, and so are you, and so am I. And I'm afraid most of us are on our phones way too much. And I've seen some fantastic examples of parents who set up family rules about phones at the table, encouraging conversational skills, doing things like without the phone, doing activities without the phone, and seeing a remarkable difference in the way that the children behave and the way that they expect. And when you're stimulating your brain every 2 seconds with some bit of new information,
dopamine,
with the boom, 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 from. I mean, I've seen children of 3 with iPads, and I really wonder how that is going to play out in the future. And again, it's about, I think we all got a bit muddled about how to parent. We quite rightly had a reaction against, I mean, this is seeping out into all kinds of different topics today, but, I think we all quite rightly had a reaction to that sort of stern parenting that didn't give any children room for growth or room for kind of having a discussion or anything like that. And I think the needle has swung way, way too far.
Yes, that's it exactly. It has. That's it exactly.
Yeah. And I hope it will swing back. I'm doubtful about the ability of people to do that, but I hope people will start, recognizing that, children probably will enjoy playing a game with you more than they will just looking at crap on an iPhone. But we've got a bit lazy, and maybe it's, I'm showing my age there, and sort of go, but I think it's the parents I've seen who really make sure that they have genuine interaction with their children. They do things together. They talk about things, and they talk things through and things like that. And don't, because it's, the smartphone has made life very tough for people, without any doubt at all, and has provided a lot of people with small t traumas. Because if I go to bed at night and I'm 15 years old and I've got 300 people telling me I'm horrible, that's bloody difficult to do. That's a trauma. That's a trauma. And
so I think what you've said there is that's what's happened, is like people like us 20 years ago were like, we would see people really struggle, and we would know their histories, and we'd be like, come, like these, you know, we need to be a bit more caring. We just need to be a bit more understand. Like, this person's really been through a lot.
Yeah.
So we were definitely advocating for that. But I do feel the pendulum has gone too far the other way. And I mentioned this before, and this is not a political statement. It's like after the election in America, lots of university campuses cancelled classes so that because their student body was traumatized by the result and needed to stay home. And I just want to say something about that. However, the gardeners were still gardening.
Yeah.
But the cleaners were still cleaning the toilets. The canteen workers were still preparing and getting rid of food. They had to go into work and work their day regardless of how they felt. There's something almost about that was aristocracy. Like, the aristocracy had to take to their beds.
Yes.
And the little people, they had to just soldier on. So I just want to say, like, get the fuck over yourself. Like, you know what? That would have been a perfect day to build resilience, right? And go through a process, right? That would have been a good, like, get your ass out. Like, maybe you're just, and I'm not minimizing the distress that some people are going through as their reaction to that. It's like, your distress is valid.
Yeah.
And then you've been weeping as you go and make notes in your law lecture or your history exam, right? But you know what? That would have built a muscle of resilience that would serve you well in the future. Yeah. So there's, to kind of wrap this up, it's like the language is overused and slapped everywhere. Yeah. There's feelings are valid, and there is a process that you can engage in if you choose to I think, and what I've seen in you and what I've seen in a lot of other people is that we can't erase the past. It never should have happened, but we can transmute it into wisdom, and we can transmute it into a strength. And that's all you can do with it, because we haven't got a time machine and we can't go back and make that not happen. That's what you can do with it. But you can't do that if you're stuck wandering around going, but it's a trauma, right? You just, you can't. Yeah. There is, all struggle can be made good. All struggle can serve you and empower you and strengthen you if you engage in that process. That's the hill I'm dying on.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, I think we all have to be very careful about how we use language, and that we don't minimize genuine issues. And I would encourage all parents to really, really check your social media and how you're using it and how your children are using it, and try and intervene as early as possible in not making it a habit for your children to be accessing it at an inappropriate age. That's my 2 penneth.
Okay. So I think we covered a lot there. Love to know what everybody thinks about that, what your reactions are. Do you think we're right? Do you think we're wrong? Please let us know. I'm sure there's somebody will say, well, you should have said this about this. But whatever.
I think you'll find that it'll stir up a hornet's nest.
Okay, we're good for that. We're good for that. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next week. Take care.
Thanks a lot.